Welcome back to the Morning Show here at Rise News. Joining us now to speak on the preparedness of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, on their readiness for tomorrow's governorship and State House of Assembly's election is the Chief Press Secretary of the INEC Chairman, ROTIMI Oyekανmi. Good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
We'll just start it off on a soft note and then just find out from you and from the Commission, how prepared are INEC for the governorship and the State House of Assembly elections tomorrow?
How prepared INEC is?
Yes.
You said?
Yes.
Oh, we are prepared. You know, the governorship elections and the State House of Assembly election is they are all part of the general elections that we started planning for since 2015. And of course, you know the events that unfolded on February 23rd when we had to postpone the election originally scheduled for 16 February because of problems we had with logistics. We have since overcome that, and we postponed the election by 1 week, and we took responsibility, and I apologize to Nigerians. And now we are holding the governorship, the second leg of the general elections on Saturday, and we are fully prepared. We have deployed materials to all the states, and the movement to the racks will begin as soon as possible. The smart card readers have been configured, and the officials have been retrained, and things are in place. We don't envisage any problem. Just yesterday, we had a meeting with the security agencies, and the Inspector General of Police was there personally, and he assured us of cooperation as usual. And we hope that all things being equal, we will have a good election. We pray that we don't have the instance we had in the last one where some individuals invaded some polling units and disrupted election, snatching ballot boxes and abducting officials. If people obey the rules, we're going to have a good election.
Indeed. There was also a meeting, Mr. Oyekανmi, after the presidential and National Assembly elections to review and take stock. We wonder what were some of the challenges highlighted and what are we going to be seeing differently tomorrow. Also yesterday at that meeting with the security agencies, INEC is threatening not to give certificates of return to people who intimidate their workers and hold them under duress.
Thank you very much. Let me start with the second point you raised. You know that, yes, INEC officials are there, collation officers, returning officers, to make a declaration. But this has to be done according to the requirements of the law. But when you put a gun to our official's head and literally force him to make a pronouncement, that is not something done voluntarily. It's not something that you can say that fulfills the requirement of the law. And if that officer writes a report to the INEC chairman or the commission to state that, look, it is true that I made this pronouncement, but it was done under duress, I think that the commission reserves the right and must take action on that report so that you don't reward bad behavior. That's exactly what the INEC chairman was referring to yesterday, that no, you cannot invade a collation center with some people fully armed and then, you know, put our officials under duress and force them literally to declare you winner and expect that we will give you certificate of return. We are not going to do that. That is what the chairman was talking about.
And to the second point, you took a review and stock of the first elections. What were some of the challenges highlighted? Yes. And were they peculiar to regions, or was it a general challenge that was witnessed? And what will be different tomorrow?
Thank you very much. You know, very often Nigerians don't really appreciate the enormous space that INEC has to cover in organizing the general elections. This is a very huge country. And you know, the requirements of the logistics we need are not entirely owned by INEC. And of course, there are other factors that may affect the plans that we have made. And in looking at all these things, the delays in deployment, in sending materials, there are lessons for the future, because you see, if you take INEC of today from the INEC of 2015, the things we are dealing with are quite different. For instance, in 2015, the number of registered voters was almost 70 million. Now we are dealing with over 84 million registered voters. In 2015, we had less than 25 political parties, 26 political parties. Now we have 91, 73 of which participated in the presidential election. That means that the ballot papers are bigger, the quantity is more, and of course, you still have to deploy to all the 119,973 polling units we have all over the country. So we have taken stock because, just like the INEC chairman said in a previous conversation, after the general election, there are things that we need to discuss about the future, because we have 84 million registered voters now. By the next general election, who knows? It will have risen to about 100 million, and who knows how many number of political parties we are going to have. And the more you have, the more materials you have to deal with, and of course, you still have to deploy. And then, maybe by the next general election, we will have created more polling units because, you know, the population is expanding, there are new settlements, and they have to be taken care of. So all these things have been harvested, and it will form the basis for our profiling solutions going forward.
Okay, still on the issue of not issuing certificates to those who compel INEC of officials to declare results in their favor. Now, what happens thereafter? That is still hanging. If you don't give the winner, in quotes, the certificate, what happens thereafter? That's one question. Then on the supplementary elections in 14 states, the publicity about that is coming a bit late in the day. But what I want to ask now, is it in the presidential election as well as the National Assembly election? The results, if the presidential election is part of this supplementary because elections did not take place in those units, are you going to add this to the presidential result already declared?
For the first question, when the commission eventually decides, I don't know which of the senatorial district or the constituency that is going to be, the decision is going to be taken. When the commission finally decides not to issue a certificate of return, the commission will then announce the next step. That means we have to go back to that place and conduct the election once again. Then with the supplementary election that we want to do, it's not going to involve the presidential election because we have already declared the result of the presidential election. The supplementary election is about the National Assembly election, that is, of course, the senatorial and House of Reps. That's what the supplementary election is all about. And you know, for the presidential, there are some issues that some members of the board may not fully understand. Now, the number of cancellations in the presidential elections were not substantial enough to affect the overall results. In other words, if, for instance, you have a polling unit, let's just assume you have a polling unit, and there are cancellations in that polling unit, but the cancellations are not more than the number of registered voters, you know, you can make a declaration. In other words, when the margin of lead, if the candidate in the first position, if the margin of lead that is not more than the number of registered voters, then you can make a declaration. So what I'm saying in essence is that the total number of cancellations that we had in the presidential election were not substantial enough to affect the overall results. So we made a declaration. But in the senatorial and federal constituency, House of Reps, the effect of the ballot box snatching and all the other things that were carried out affected the number of registered voters substantially in such a way that we have to go back and conduct those supplementary elections. That's why we are going back. So we are not doing presidential election, supplementary election in terms of presidential election again. It has to do only with the National Assembly elections.
Okay, if I may just follow up. So clearly what you're saying, those who did not vote in the presidential election as a result of this violence, have been clearly disenfranchised in that election. But it also appears that this position will be preempting whatever happens at the tribunal, where some people are challenging your result, the result anyway.
Well, I don't think so. It depends on what the petitioner is talking about. Because whatever we do is based on law, is based on the rules, and we can clearly defend those things. You know that INEC is not the one organizing thugs, for instance, to disrupt elections. And if people don't interfere with our process, we'd make a declaration, you know. Where we have conducted 195 elections since 2015, and where there is no interference, we quickly make a declaration. But I think the media also needs to focus on those who interfere with our elections, those who send thugs, or those who invade our polling unit, our collation centers, and disrupt our activities there. It's unacceptable, you know, and these people should be identified, apprehended, and prosecuted. You know, the interest should not just be about declaring results, or people should not be interested in result. People should be interested in the process that lead to the declaration. If people come with knives and guns and daggers and you know, abduct our officials and shoot them or kill them, people should be concerned. People should say, look, this is not acceptable, and we must not allow this to happen. But what I find, unfortunately, is that people don't pay enough attention to those criminal acts. And the more we condone this act, the more they will continue. It's not the first time they are doing this. There is no general election that you don't have this sort of thing happen. But we are determined to working with the security agents to ensure that it doesn't continue. You cannot force yourself on the people. If you're a politician and you are popular and your programs are popular, campaign and let the people decide. But when you go and disrupt election and abduct electoral officials and say they must declare, it means you are not sure that you can win and then you want to impose yourself on people. That is not democracy.
You just said that your actions can be sort of in accordance with the rules and can be justified. But can you justify the way the smart card readers were used or not used? Because INEC has been criticized from several quarters, including the Situation Room, the group of 70 civil society organizations, about the lack of uniformity and the kind of results that were produced. I also want to ask you about the militarization of the electoral process. You may be aware that there are reports that a soldier killed one person in River State on the eve of the elections. That is not in accordance to law because there's a Supreme Court judgment, an extant Supreme Court judgment, banning the use of military in the elections. Can you justify these?
Well, you know, by the security arrangement that INEC has, because we have in this interagency consultative committee on election security that comprises all security agencies. We just met yesterday. And the deployment plan that we have is that we have 3 rings for the elections. The first ring comprises the police officer and other officers of the sister agencies that will be around the polling unit. They are not armed. Then we have the second ring, which comprises the patrol teams. Those ones are armed, but they are not too far away from the polling units. They patrol the streets, and they can be called in anytime there is problem. Then we have the last ring, which now comprises the army, the members of the army. And they are the border posts. You know, it is when there is complete chaos that you can then bring them in to help the situation. But, you know, we really don't need these things in this country. But you and I know how elections are, you know, what happens during an election, the things that you don't even expect people will do. And if you don't take measures to check those things well ahead of time, you may end up having hundreds of people killed. You know, it's unfortunate that the person you talked about was killed. I mean, our ad hoc staff that was killed, we feel very bad, not just about the ad hoc staff, but all Nigerians that lost their life needlessly. In that, just take a look. We are not fighting a war. We are having an election, and that number of people, those people were killed. Every soul is important as far as we are concerned. And apart from that, some people are still not nursing injuries arising from the election. Election is a joyful activity. You shouldn't get involved in violence. Concerning the smart card reader, now, you know, the controversy about the smart card reader is needless because we are not using the smart card reader in the way that people are referring to in the Supreme Court ruling. No. The smart card reader is not replacing the voter, the registered voter. It does three things. One, it identifies the permanent voter's card that each voter must present when it gets to the polling unit. Okay? Then it ascertains that the person presenting the PVC is the actual owner. Then after that, you have to go through biometrics protocol, which is you authenticate. You take your fingerprint, and because at the point of registration, your 10 fingerprints have been taken in and recorded. So that communication between the smart card reader and the permanent voter's card tells us that you are not a ghost, that's number one, and that you are the actual owner of the card. That's what the smart card reader does. And then it stores this data so that at the end of voting, you can then retrieve the data and compare with the number of ballots that you have. And that is essentially what the smart card reader is for. And everybody has commended the smart card reader for that. And it has really helped us to ensure that, look, you know, people just don't manipulate the process and announce figures. You can follow the process through.
But why was it not
according
used?
to our guidelines and rules,
why was it not used uniformly?
that's what I'm saying, that I'm coming to that.
Okay.
Where you have willful, number one, there are two instances. If you have, for instance, the breakdown of the smart card reader, which is rare, complete failure of the smart card reader is that it's not functioning, it can't do anything. But some people will confuse the inability of the smart card reader to capture your biometrics as failure. That's not failure, because somebody else can come and it will read the biometrics of that person. So that is one. But where there is a willful, when people refuse totally and is willful to use the smart card reader, according to our rules, we score 0 for that polling unit. Now, two things can happen. Yes, we can have some unscrupulous ad hoc staff conniving with the community to circumvent the smart card reader. In that instance, we will not count the votes. Wherever it is done, where you have people who say they don't want to use the smart card reader, and because, you know, if the smart card reader breaks down, we have an ICT team that can come and try to fix it. If they can't fix it, we have spare smart card reader that can be brought in quickly to replace those ones. But where those parameters are not there, and you just refuse to use it, and then you are voting manually, that will not be acceptable. And that accounts for why some of the votes were cancelled in the National Assembly election, that a supplementary election is then going to be organized for on Saturday, alongside the governorship election.
All right, lastly, Mr. Oyekami, what are the expectations of INEC in terms of voter turnout tomorrow? Because several of the political parties are actually blaming INEC for lack of voter education or not enough voter education, and that's the reason for the low turnout of voting in this cycle of voting.
Well, we expect Nigerians to come out. Sensitization about this general election started a long time ago. And I agree with you, this is a vast country. And I often tell people that even if we put all of our budget into advertising, we may not still be able to cover the entire country. Because, you know, all Nigerians over the age of 18 are stakeholders. That's what the law says. The law does not say that you must have a primary school certificate or secondary certificate to be able to vote. You are 18 and you're a Nigerian and you are not a criminal. You are not in jail. Now, if it were to be for INEC alone, we can't cover the entire country. So it's also the responsibility of the political parties to also encourage their members to come and vote for them. In other words, you know, you can't say INEC alone should be saddled with the responsibility of asking people to come out and vote. You are the political party. What effort are the political parties making? I'm sorry to say, political parties are not making enough effort in this demand. We thank the media We thank the civil society organizations and all partners. We thank the religious leaders, the traditional rulers for their assistance, because without them, even the mileage we have covered, we will never have gotten we will never have been able to cover that mileage. But honestly, it's, if you check the dimension of sensitizing the entire country, given what the Constitution says about who can vote, INEC cannot do it alone. We are just an organization. Yes, we have a little over 16,000 staff, and we are responsible for over 84 million registered voters. So the responsibility are huge. And it's not just conducting election alone that we do. We register political party. We have all other we have so many other activities that Nigerians are not aware of. So my take is that it's a collective responsibility. We've tried our best. Our social media pages have been active as far back as 1 year ago. For those who are on social media, our Facebook page, our Twitter page, Instagram. Yeah, thank you.
All right, ROTIMI OYEKANMI talking about the Chief Press Secretary to
Thank you for having me.
Chairman. Yes, always a pleasure. I wish INEC all the best in tomorrow's elections. And it's now time for a short break on the morning show. When we return, we'll be reviewing headlines on today's newspapers. Please stay with us.